got a little cleaning up to do around the lodge here still, so pardon the mess. It shouldn't distract too much. This is all new. There's not even any subscribers here. So, folks, once I have someone to clean up for, maybe I will. But this guy Socrates, I don't think we talk about him enough. And maybe we do, and maybe I just don't tune into the people that are talking about him enough. But we've kind of lost his whole spirit. And his life is pretty inspiring. And his mistake, I'll just get this out of the way. This isn't like a stick around till the end to see what his mistake was. What I'm getting at with that, and we'll kind of go through the value I see in his life and stuff, but to get you out of here if that's all you wanted. His mistake was not compromising an ounce on his integrity, on his morals, on his virtue, on living the life directly in line with what he was challenging people, with what he was philosophizing, you know. He wasn't a big hat, no cattle type guy. He lived it out, and it got him killed because he had plenty of chances to not die. He's the guy, if you're totally new to the subject, he's the guy, he's like the original philosopher in Athens, a Greek guy, and the famous trial of Socrates, where the result was the death penalty. And so I guess we'll end up there if we're talking about the guy and how he lived his life. His whole thing, this isn't a biography. I think I'm trying to focus on what I found important here. And just relax, folks. I'm just exhausted by a lot of this platform, and I know this won't. I know you got to be fast-paced and structured and all that to make a video that does well, but who cares? We're just talking Socrates, folks. We're just talking Socrates, a very powerful and inspiring man. And a lot of these guys, I used to think, it's just a name you have to memorize for a history class or something. And it's made me just I'm older and I'm capable of understanding more things or am interested in more actual philosophies and stuff now. But it just seems like when you're in the education system and classes, and again, maybe that's just literally by me being someone just focused on a grade and just seeing it as something to get through. But it just seems like in a lot of that system, you don't learn about the kind of the power of these guys or how it relates to, I think people like Socrates, it's more relevant now than ever because of what he was about. But anyways, what he was about is the Socratic method, as it's come to be known, just ruthless questioning. Question after question, follow-up question, he would get talking to you, and he was trying to deconstruct your worldview through questioning and trying to arrive at why do you believe this thing? If you say you believe it, if you go along with others who believe it, why is that exactly? And, trying to arrive at some deeper, fundamental truth you can cling to or in most cases, just destroy your worldview because, we don't like to think a lot of times about why. It's just easy to adopt a thing and just say that's our thing and whatever, it's good. It gives a structure and something to be a part of. And we don't question ourselves, and there's no short barefoot guy walking around questioning all of us like Socrates was doing in the Athens marketplace. And Athens is this huge city. This is 400 BC. 250,000 people. It's full-on civilization. no iPhones and Roombas, of course. So how civilized were they if they didn't even have those? But it is crazy. Like a lot of times you just think like all that's just ancient, anything before 500 years ago or whatever, just like all ancient and dusty roads and shacks and dumb and undeveloped and whatever. Not necessarily, but like as a general sentiment sometimes. But it's like a huge modern city, full-on civilization. And Socrates is already seeing through a lot of the institutionalized thought and things that develop alongside civilization. And so he starts asking far too many questions and poking around a bit and poking around a bunch. His friends, this isn't entirely relevant, but his friends, by all accounts, he was a quite ugly man, which, a lot of times you got to come up with, if you're not automatically successful and whatever, like an easy path in life based on your built-in status or appearance and things, then, you're forced to figure something else out. And so that could be why he became a great thinker. But he's a pretty short guy, flat nose, they say, dog face or something like that, pot belly, just not flattering descriptions of the guy. So just this guy, old guy, he kind of started doing his philosophizing, and at least after his 40s, he was a soldier in his younger years, as I think probably most people were in that time. So this old barefoot guy, short, pot belly, pretty unappealing face, just wandering around the downtown Athens marketplace. And I can imagine he's someone you would try not to make eye contact with, if you didn't want to talk to him, which I assume most people wouldn't want to. Folks, most people are just trying to buy their apples. What do you buy in an Athens marketplace? I don't know. Trying to buy their goods and not have some weird guy deconstruct their reality. So could have been a guy you tried not to make eye contact with. I don't want to talk to Socrates today, but it eventually caught up to him. He did several years, had a fruitful career of doing this, of philosophizing. Gained a following, gained students, gained influence, but famously, he lived in squalor. That's the other part about this. He never profited from his philosophizing. Folks, he just did it for the love of the game, it seems like. It was literally all he wanted to do. He was just obsessed with philosophizing. I don't even know if I have my voice yet. It still seems a little gravelly. This is early morning, folks. He was just obsessed with philosophizing. So that's all he did. And he kind of got by on the charity of, he had friends in higher places and wealthy friends and people knew him and knew what he was up to, and those who liked him, supported him, and fed him and things like that. And he had a wife and a family at different stages. I don't know that whole story, but whatever. He's not like a isolated hermit, he just doesn't need a lot. He renounces material accumulation and material wealth as part of his philosophy. His whole thing is virtue and living life according to virtue. Your own convictions and beliefs, and living in accordance with that and with your truth, and that is the highest good to ascribe to. And there is no ultimate worth or fulfillment in these illusory games that civilizations naturally start to develop based on living around all these people now. You don't just have a small tribe. And I'm sure it's always human nature, even in a smaller tribe. But once you have all these people to start comparing yourself to and, chasing status that someone else seems to have, and once these civilizations grow and just your world expands and possibilities expand with all these specialized roles and all these options and whatever, just a lot more you're aware of living around all these people. And then that just brings in all these other things to chase, which are seemingly across the board fruitless in a generalized sense. Kind of this glorification of hollow pursuits and games and comparative games that we enter into. So Socrates, he's totally against that. And he's asking questions, trying to get people to see the games they're part of and the beliefs they've adopted and not formed for themselves. And so that was a big part of it. He's the guy, he said, an unexamined life is not a life worth living, something to that effect. So he was all about examining life, as we've said, which personally I don't know. I'm kind of split on that, whether a lot of the times it seems like if we're here, the point would just be to live while we're here and not examine life while we're here. But it is fun, folks. I'm examining Socrates and thus life right now. So I guess maybe I do agree with him. I don't know. It doesn't seem like something you necessarily have to agree with, but that was his whole thing. And he said, he was very humble, folks. Very humble, very humilitus. He was not pompous and postulating, as some public figures may seem to some people these days when it comes to knowledge and education and things like that. But we won't go there today. And that's all good too. It's all good. Very down to earth, folks. Famously, someone called him Socrates is the wisest. There's a whole story about an oracle they went to and asked the oracle who the wisest person. Is there anyone wiser than Socrates? They asked the oracle. Oracle said, no. And so they tell Socrates, hey, this oracle, which what even is an oracle? It's like a cave you went to ask questions to, and there's a person sitting there who would interpret what the cave's response was or something like that, as I understand it. Anyways, they go to Socrates and say, hey, the oracle of Delphi said there's no one wiser than you. But his response to that was, he wasn't well, makes sense. I'm so frickin' wise. Makes sense that oracle would say that. He said, if that is the case, or if that is possibly even the case, the reason that would be the case is because I know what I don't know, or I know that which I don't know. And so he saw wisdom as coming from accepting the unknowable nature of a lot of things, and not not living as if you are in control. I don't know, that might be putting words in his mouth, but just that whole thing of I'm aware that I can't possibly, in the scheme of things, I don't possibly know anything relatively, and I'm just trying my best to faithfully and truthfully interpret my experience and not just adopt some explanation or some tradition I've been told if it's not actually in line with things I think upon further examination. And so that's what kind of got him in trouble. He wasn't going along. He didn't renounce he didn't like outright renounce the Athens gods, but he was just like not on board to the degree you're supposed to be, to conform to that Athens, the religion of the day. You had these different gods and their different roles, and I'm not super well versed on Greek religious traditions around that time. Folks, what am I well versed on? Not a whole lot. A little bit on Socrates. I enjoyed reading about Socrates here. So that's why we're talking Socrates by the fire. Look at this fire, folks. It's so funny, I say, folks. There is no one here, but that's fine. You don't care about that. We'll get there. What were we talking about? Socrates, I know. Folks, we were talking Socrates. Socrates' fatal mistake. Oh, I mentioned why he got put on trial, I guess. He had, so he's all about like trusting the thought in his inner voice and what he can arrive at through examining life. So he's not like going around, you guys are dumb, these Athens gods are bullshit, it's all fake, you guys are losers. He's not like outright rejecting these things. And he's not an atheist. But again, he's just questioning people about it. And personally, he holds that he feels an inner voice within him, like kind of outside of him. And he calls it the daemon or daimon. Demon, not demon. Daimon. Daimon, like this guiding spirit within him. And he attributes his entire philosophy, career, and like work and like that. He says that's all motivated by this inner voice that is telling him to do this and telling him this is the valuable path that he should be pursuing. And he listens to that and he develops spirituality more personally meaningful to him based on this feeling and based on his own examining of life. And he's not and he's questioning others about their religious or say spiritual beliefs. And so this is what gets him in trouble, because he's corrupting the youth a little too much is one of the charges. And the other charge is basically not believing enough in the Athens gods, impiety, which is like a religious charge for not, I don't know, you had to be on board with the religion back then. And if you weren't, and especially if you were vocally not totally on board and like sowing, what would you say? Folks, vocabulary is something I could improve. Discontent, or like sowing all these young people who are less sure of the stated traditions and norms of the day, So that's basically the charges, causing a little too much critical thought downtown in Athens. Plato, folks, we all know Plato, the Atlantis guy. Plato was one of his students. It goes Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. You probably all know that. I'm not a philosophy major, so there's some stuff I kind of have to uncover still. But that was the lineage. Aristotle was Plato's student then. Anyways, you can kind of imagine, I guess, the two sides of the trial. Just this authority, government, state, who doesn't like this guy because he's talking a little too much and he's undermining authority a little too much, gaining a little too much influence. So they're like, you gotta stop doing that, man. Your whole deal of Socratic method and examining life is kind of against our whole deal of telling people how it is and maintaining control by doing that. So that's basically it. It makes sense why they're trying to get this guy to knock it off. And if he's not, they're going to have to take some extreme measures. So it was this huge spectacle. Like, he had become pretty famous, or well known, not famous. He wasn't like, a lot of people weren't appreciative of what he was doing. But he did have a lot of support, and just overall, a lot of people came to know of him. And it was this big trial in Athens. And they had like 500 jurors, or like voters. I'm not quite sure how they were selected exactly, but it was a huge vote. And he only lost, I think it was like 280 to 220, or maybe even a little narrower than that. So it was pretty split. It's not like just a king saying, Socrates, you're bad, you're going to die, But he had a chance to defend himself, and again, this comes back to his whole fatal mistake. He would not apologize at all, no remorse, no recognizing that he could face severe punishment here, and so just backtracking a bit and okay, I won't do that for a while, or I'll lay off, I'm sorry, government, sorry for, following my inner voice and virtue to its fullest extent and power possible. I'll stop doing that. Sorry to cause too much of a ruckus downtown. None of that. The guy's stubborn, and he sticks to what he believes in. And so they find him guilty because he's not trying to say he's not guilty. If those are the charges, then he's fully guilty of them, because that's his exact deal. And when the sentencing comes, he still has chances to not die. Like his supporters are saying, just give him something. Just, show a little remorse, or we can get you exiled probably, or just banished from the city for a bit. They don't want that. You don't have to die over this. But Socrates, he's so stubborn, and he's in his 70s at this point. So he probably knows he doesn't have a long time left anyways, but he seems like it's just nope, I'm going to die over this. I'm going to teach them a lesson. They're going to have to kill me over this. There's no other way. And in the sentencing, I forget what the back and forth. Folks, we know all this. That's the other thing. This is all kind of based on the writings of Plato, who admired Socrates and was his student. So you can imagine, to some extent, he's painted in a favorable light, whatever that means. I don't think Plato would paint him in a more negative light than existed. So either neutral or positive light, probably, this guy's being painted in through these historical records. But they ask him to apologize or something, to reduce his sentencing, or anything you want, anything you have to say about what you've done, Socrates. And he says, no, I have nothing to apologize for. And frankly, furthermore, you guys should be giving me free meals and lodging for what I'm doing for this city, for how I'm advancing thought with all my philosophizing. And they did not appreciate that response, of course. And so then they vote to hand down the death penalty, which was drinking hemlock, which was a poison. So he, whatever. Killed himself, I guess, because he just drank the hemlock, and that was it for that guy, the guy who we call Socrates. But it shouldn't be it for him, because we forget his whole deal these days. And why? It seems like we forget his whole deal a lot. There isn't a lot of question asking encouraged or allowed. I know there's the whole thing, that's kind of science's purported whole thing, and that's fine, but this is well beyond science. Science is just a tool within this unexplainable awareness we find ourselves, and a lot of the times it feels like outside of acceptable and outside of the current acceptable hypotheses that exist within this narrow tool of what we call the physical sciences. Like we pretend that small arena is everything, and any questions or curiosities you have outside of that, or outside of your accumulated religion you were born into, these are our main institutions, and so any questions and curiosities you have outside of these are just kind of demonized to some degree, and weird and unproductive, and so I don't know how you balance that, I guess. I think it's always good to ask questions to arrive at why the current thing is the thing, and not just accepting it because something has built up on either side of things. And so, folks, I don't know. I think we just need a little more Socrates, right? Folks, how can we steal Socrates' energy and life and incorporate it into our own experience? Sounds like a good question. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. I think we got somewhere, folks. Hope you enjoyed hanging out by the fire and talking Socrates' fatal mistake. All right. We'll see you next time.